to the Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Noel Mcdermott. I've got a great guest, Jon Salmon, who's joined us back again. Last time I saw him, we were actually in real life, which tells you how long ago that was, if you can remember those experiences. So well before the pandemic, and we're going to be catching up about all of that. Before I get into introducing Jon properly, just want to remind you that if you're checking this show out on the 16th of March at 9 o'clock UK time, we're live. It'd be lovely to hear from you. You can join in. James, who is my techie, who you can't see, will be scanning the digital airwaves and looking for any comments, and we'll share them with me. Or you can drop me a WhatsApp on 07506 319 745. That's +44 7506 319 745. Be lovely to hear from you. So if you see me looking at my phone every now and then, or just looking generally distracted and useless, that's because I'm a bloke and I can't do two things at once. But there you go. Anyway, that's enough of me. That's one of my people who had a great day today. So that's a nice bit of news I've just received. Enough of that. Welcome back, Jon. It's wonderful to have you back with me. How are you?
Yeah, no, it's lovely to be here. I was looking back, and it was April 2019 that we were in the studio together. So I kind of think the last 2 years don't really count. So it's in theory, it's only been a couple of months since we last saw each other, right?
Yes, something like that. In that sort of smelly, crappy studio in Soho, by not far from the Opera House, which is it genuinely feels like it was an absolutely alien world that I'm really trying to remember what it was like. Was it? It was April. It was being dark and cold.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, it was probably arriving a bit earlier and going to Pret nearby, and
that's right.
Thinking right. I think it's around this corner, and as you say, the kind of the alleyways of Soho and around Covent Garden, and knocking on the door and going down to the basement of the studio. But it was cool, right? It was. It's exciting. It's good to do things in person, but we'll
better. And then not long after that, the following year, wasn't it? Then suddenly the pandemic hit. So let's find out a bit about you, so people won't know who you are, given that this was quite a long time ago, and that was when we were still part of Men's radio station. So, but we won't have that recording, I don't think, on our sort of on our library. So Jon Salmon is somebody that has lived experience of going into recovery from mental health problems. Yeah, that's roughly the story. So let's hear about a little bit about Jon Salmon before you became the sort of advocate for sort of mental wellness that you are now. Sort of, who were you back then before you understood all these things?
Yeah, thank you, Noel. And again, just thank you for having me back on your show. It's just wonderful. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you. And if there is any people watching live now, if there are any questions coming in, I just think it's just wonderful to have these kind of opportunities to talk about mental health, well-being, and really just try and talk about it more, so we kind of take away the stigma and just try and make it as easy as possible for us to kind of look after ourselves and other people around us. And the kind of, I guess, the short story is that I think, like a lot of people, especially in the last couple of years with the pandemic, of the work that's been done to kind of talk about mental health more, people also are starting to maybe have a better understanding of what mental health is and how that can be impacted by your lifestyle or a number of different factors. And it's quite common that either yourself or somebody that may be struggling now with some form of mental illness. And I have been, I guess, touched either kind of personally. I've had my own problems with my mental health when I was younger, and also through family and friends. And I sadly lost my dad after a period of him having depression when I was 17, and he sadly took his life. And as a family, we didn't really know how to deal with his illness, and also how to deal with his death. And I guess the way that we did deal with it, me in particular as well, was just to kind of bury those kind of emotions. And there wasn't any counselling or any kind of support that was really provided back then. And kind of a few years later, that kind of coping mechanism of trying to not deal with the grief and kind of bit me on my ass, I guess. And in my first job at the kind of the turn of the millennium, around kind of 99, and I ended up being after kind of, for me, it came completely out of the blue, and I had a psychotic episode one morning, woke up late, missed work, and was very, very, very scared, very, very paranoid and worried. And luckily, I guess my brother was able to pick me up, and he took me back to my mum's, and it wasn't long before I was kind of sectioned and in a mental health unit. And I guess what that did for a couple of weeks, that kind of contained me. I guess that kind of got me to a place, the I guess kind of holding pattern, a bit like an aeroplane just going round in circles. I was kind of safe, but and yeah, that was about it. And I luckily I was able to get out of hospital, and it did feel like kind of escaping hospital. Yes. I definitely wasn't better when I left hospital, and again, still, even after having something as severe as that kind of breakdown, I wasn't offered really any kind of talking therapies. It was still very, very limited then. And what was a psychotic episode ended up turning into depression and more kind of more mental ill health. And in the end, it was very, very lucky. I did go to a very bad place, but in the end, luckily, I was able to get the right kind of help for me, which included talking therapies, and time and space to kind of rebuild myself and get myself back on my feet. And that took, the best, a good year of being off work and building up my confidence slowly. But it was that stigma, Noel, that we talked about last time, that the reason why, even though I got to a better place of recovery, I wouldn't tell anybody about it because of the stigma that exists. There was no way I was going to tell a future employer, girlfriend, new mate down the pub that I'd had a mental illness, right? Because they would all just not want to talk to me, and I wouldn't get that career opportunity, and I wouldn't get that girlfriend, and I wouldn't, all these things in my head that I thought people would think about me having a mental illness meant that I didn't tell anybody about it for well over 16 years.
And for people who don't know, I do know because I've worked in that system. People work very hard to make psych wards good and welcoming, but they are frightening things. That's it. So in an acute psych ward, people are in a very distressed state, and no matter how hard the staff work to make it pleasant, it's frightening, it's difficult, it's challenging, and losing your freedom as well. Having people tell you what you can and can't do. It's interesting. I think there's a gender divergence here, that often what you find with guys is that there's a move into the more severe and enduring long-term mental illnesses, whereas women tend to have the more common mental illnesses such as depression and anxiety. So your story is very familiar to me as a mental health professional. As a man, typically men will experience either their own suicidal ideation or the suicide of their dad or brother, and or some sort of period of time in severe sort of mental illness such as you, and yet guys still find it almost impossible to talk about that stuff. So I can imagine it must have been quite hellish for you, to be honest, sort of, to have all those experiences and to feel like there was no real outlet for it. You couldn't just, I mean, it's like you couldn't have a conversation with somebody and say, you know, I'm all right now, but that was really horrible what happened to me.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you like definitely people that when I was in the final kind of day patient there where I was at the hospital, I guess that for a few, the people I met there, it was, you know, they had, you know, a variety of different mental health problems, and that did really help, where you were meeting other people that were going through recovery, you know, some people, whether it was eating disorders or, you know, all manner of things. But I think it, in the right space, allows you to have empathy and understanding of what somebody else is going through, that also helped partly my recovery. But yeah, I think once you're out of that setting, where you know, society just there wasn't really an opportunity to really talk about it. And I think also probably even friends and family around you, they're probably quite nervous of almost like triggering something that, like, oh great, he's better now, like let's just not talk about his illness, and everybody's just crossing their fingers that you don't end up getting ill again. So I think there's almost a fear of talking about it once somebody is even, you know, a few years after recovery, because it's like, oh well, I don't want to set John off again or say the wrong thing.
Yeah, like somebody who comes out of alcoholism and everybody's hiding the bottles of wine behind their back. Sort of like that sort of thing.
100%.
Absolutely. It's a very odd thing. I guess this is sort of this explanation seems to me to make sense of why it became important for you to become an advocate in the field, somebody who had lived experience, because of the sense of fear and isolation and stigma that you faced, and the fact that it wasn't a common topic of conversation, which has become much more common, but it certainly wasn't back in those days. And how did you get into that sort of advocacy space, a person who shared their story in terms of lived experience? And for people who don't know, lived experience is just a term that means that somebody's had experience of something and is willing to share their experience and encourage other people to share their experience in terms of mental illness and recovery from mental illness. Yeah,
so, you know, even though I didn't talk about my own mental health or my mental illness to anybody, I really was a subject that I would never go near. Obviously, I was, you know, tuned into, you know, if I saw something written in the newspaper in a positive light, or if I saw somebody talking positively or trying to campaign, you know, about trying to improve parity of esteem between physical health provision and mental health provision, I'd make a note of those individuals, and there was very few and far between, right? So Stephen Fry is probably the one that's been, you know, banging the drum for a number of years, but there was very, very few men that, but you know, I kind of like, if somebody like Professor Green did a documentary as Johnny Benjamin, I've got his book up on the shelf here. It's a
Johnny's a really cool guy.
It's really good.
Times I love his bits, actually.
Yeah, he's a wonderful man. And you know, so over the years, I just thought, oh, that's great, they're doing it. But it was definitely something that I would never, ever even go near. And as almost, and then, you know, I think probably two things. So the main thing was a very close friend of mine called John. He gave me a call in 2016, and he phoned me to say that his sister had died, and his sister had also been a very close friend of mine a number of years as well previous. We kind of lost touch a bit, but she sadly took her life after kind of had a bout of postnatal depression
Mm.
with her second child, and that obviously was incredibly sad news to get that call. I'll never forget receiving that call. But what it did inside me was, as well as sadness, was one of anger, was one of how come in 2016 there is somebody who is suffering with an illness, who's not been able to get the help that they need. And I guess I'd hoped that since my dad had been ill and I had been ill, that things had improved enough that somebody like Jon's sister would have been able to get the right help. And it was just a massive wake-up call for me. And I look back to it now, that if the right help had been there for my dad, he would probably still be here today, and similar for Jon's sister. And I decided that I wanted to do something. And the kind of most simple thing for me, he thought, was to go running. Running has really helped me, and helped me. Like I don't run every day. I'm not like a mad runner. And especially when I was still in kind of recovering from my mental illness, it was a real struggle just to, literally go for a small walk without the fear and the worry. And
it's the frigging exhaustion of being ill. I think people who maybe not have experienced directly mental illness, they understand how physical it is. Because I think the way it's talked about often, it's talked about as though it's just your head's messed up a little bit, but it's actually not. I mean, it smashes into your body in a similar way.
Yeah, no, I remember going for a run with my brother, or it wasn't really a run, but going out with my brother and another friend. And I just didn't have the energy, right? I was still very nervous and paranoid and just not comfortable even being out, right? But I'd seen that kind of the benefit over the years of slowly getting out, a bit of exercise. So I thought kind of a challenge would be to run the London Marathon. And I just also wanted to raise money. The London Marathon obviously does an amazing job of raising millions of pounds for charity. And I wanted to raise some money for a mental health charity that supported young families, and Google did its magic, and I found a charity called Best Beginnings. They have a brilliant app, Baby Buddy app, and website with really informative videos and information for parents. And they seem like a brilliant charity to run for. They really kind of tick the boxes for me. And there was this thing called Heads Together, and didn't really know what that was. But after kind of being offered a place to be in to run the marathon for Best Beginnings, I got the message that it was part of this Heads Together campaign, which was set up by the Royals, by the young Royals, as sometimes they've been referred to as William, Harry and Kate. And they had the idea to bring 8 different mental health charities together to work together to really tackle stigma. And that really set me on my journey of kind of sharing my lived experience, as you would say, quite publicly. So I ended up going from not telling anybody to sharing my story, in sharing a stage with the Royals and Rio Ferdinand and a few other people. And like you do.
He's afraid of the stigma. I didn't want anybody to know, so I'll just get on the stage with the Royals and talk about it as my first step. That's extraordinary, Jon. It's like,
So it was, and because
it's together, and I remember that those 3 were amazing at sort of. Obviously, they just had that influence to pull people in, didn't they? So
100%, it was a game changer, really, because that power of collaboration, charities coming together to work together for to really tackle the stigma, It was a really well thought out kind of campaign. And yeah, as you say, for me, when I got, when I did that first talk, I had no idea. I had no idea that it was going to be.
I just want to talk about why tackling stigma is important. On a very basic level, and people need to understand this. Stigma stops people getting help. If you stop people getting help, they end up dead.
Yeah.
That's the way it works, which is why tackling stigma, particularly for high-profile people such as the Royals, the Rio Ferdinand, etc., is absolutely vital because it directly saves lives. You don't need to build psych wards. That's not what the issue is. The issue is to get people to understand that they're ill and that it's a treatable illness and that there is help available and that they go and ask for that help.
Yeah. Completely.
And then you save lives. That's it. It's the bottom line. It's really straightforward because the support that we do have for people when it's available and when it's accessed really, really works, which is, we'll come to that later. But I think it's really important that people understand that and they understand why somebody like yourself, Jon, is so vital what you do because you are saving lives. Every time you talk about something, you're encouraging somebody else to talk, to go, okay, that's fine, I'm like him, and he went and got help and he's all right, and that's another life saved.
Yeah, and I think you put it really, really well there, Noel. And I think people sometimes, like myself, feel, that how do I have that conversation, or how do I go about saying something? And it's of course it's not going to be that easy, but you sometimes don't need to say a lot if you can find the right person that's going to listen. It's been incredible, just by over the last few years, the amount of people that have talked to me more openly about how they're feeling, and that's the winner. And anybody can do that, right? You don't showing that understanding and empathy can, if you can create that space with your friends and family, as you say, there's an opportunity to fundamentally kind of save a life, I guess, then in the long run.
And you don't need to be a mental health professional, as you say, to do that. It's got to learn to shut up and listen.
100%. 100%. Yeah. So my mate Steve, that really helped me when I was really ill. He would come and visit me in hospital, and we've talked about it since. And he said, I was so nervous. I was so scared. I didn't know what to say. As you say, kind of psychiatric wards and stuff are, they're not like, not the calmest of places.
They're really not.
And he said that as well. He said exactly to me, going, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. But he was brilliant because he did just, he allowed me, he listened, right? And even if I wasn't making much sense, for that period of time, I was like, here's somebody I trust, and they're listening, and they're chipping in with a few points and directions, and trying to be a bit positive and guide the conversation a bit. But yeah, he's not a mental health expert. He's he was just a mate trying to be a good mate by listening.
And so you go from a psych ward to sharing a stage with the Royals.
Yeah.
It's great. And in between, you decided to run the London Marathon because you want to raise money for a charity, and you're inspired by doing this, maybe through anger, sort of because another person has taken their life unnecessarily. Okay,
Yeah.
when they could have got help. So there you are. Tell us about the sort of running and the marathon and why it was important to do that for you in particular, because when the show is called Running for Health, Running for Mental Health, what was it about the running and the marathon that was particularly drawing you, and how did it work for you in terms of sort of your recovery?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the getting to run, being able to run a marathon took 20 years, right? So I
think you're bonkers for doing it personally, sort of.
Oh well, we'll see. There's still, there's still time to convince you. I've got 35 minutes to convince you why, Noel, it's a good idea.
I just want to die at the thought of it. I'm so impressed that you can do it.
Well, yeah, we'll come on to it, but I think I'll say it now, but I think what is so inspiring about things like the London Marathon, if you've ever gone to watch, actually, it's not 20,000 Mo Farahs running. It's 20,000 people of all ages, sizes, abilities, and it's whether it's a similar kind of couch to 10K or all these things. If you put too much emphasis on it, it feels like an unachievable mountain to climb. But actually, the marathon is a bloody long way, but it's more achievable than it's marketed as, right? As what people think. And the people like some amazing people that have been running the London Marathon for a number of years, really trying to challenge that perception of what a marathon runner looks like and who can do that type of thing. Bryony Gordon is a brilliant journalist and has been running the London Marathon for a good few years. So, and really encouraging predominantly women to get out and do some exercise. But I think if I remember your question, before I go on a little marathon tangent, was, over the years, I started to apply for little races and little runs, little kind of organized 5Ks. And it did take me, a long, there used to be this really good 10K around London, and I'd finish that. And honestly, I was, I'd collapse, after doing 10K. Yeah. And it's crazy how the mind works, right? And that it's, obviously you've got to be physically fit enough to run any distance, whether it's running for a bus or running a marathon. If you've got a bus knee or whatever, it's going to be a lot harder. But I generally think if, just having some general fitness and building up slowly means you can start to take on longer distances and bigger challenges, because actually it's less about the physical and it's more about the mental
I agree.
Motivation.
Having teased you about there's something wrong with you for running a marathon, I actually did in the first lockdown, the first summer. I got up to 20K at one point. Well, I just knew that I was going to struggle. I had to do something, and having a goal around this stuff and getting out physically and running when we weren't allowed to socialize and all that sort of stuff stopped me from losing the plot in a serious way. And sort of, it was really important. There were a lot of people doing it at the time as well, and I got that sense of community, because a lot of like the communal running together could no longer happen, but people were doing it via Strava and all these apps. Were running together via the online app world, and it was it's a real sense of camaraderie and connection, and being in something together with other people. So I really understand that, and as well as the sort of uplifting, and I was doing it partly because the virus also was attacking the lungs and all that sort of stuff. So I wanted something that would strengthen my breathing. So you do the marathon, you become sort of quite high profile. Was that then a step into for you, well, I'm going to sort of now move on, for want of a better word, into more professional presentation of this type of experience, or what were you doing at that point?
Yeah, so at that point, I was running, and I still run my own business. This was never part of the plan to be talking to you, to be talking about mental health, mental illness. But I guess over the last kind of 5 years, what's been lovely is the two worlds, my working world and also, the stuff I kind of do on the side around mental health has kind of started to merge together. And I think it has been about.
So tell me about the working world so that we get a broader sense of you.
Yeah, so I run an agency called Byte Entertainment, and we produce videos and websites. So we're for different charities and organisations. I love gadgets and innovation. So the moment something new comes along, I will have generally bought it. I'm here in my loft at the moment, and if I look over there, it wouldn't take too long to pull out some bit of tech that no longer anybody wants to use. And so, yeah, setting up Byte Entertainment really was the opportunity to have my own business and to work with amazing clients, be quite selfish, really, of trying to work with interesting people wanting to do good things.
And working in the creative industries as well.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. So,
I mean, again, it's interesting because the sort of, I guess, the prototypical image of somebody who's been locked up in a psych ward is not a successful business owner, is not a marathon runner, is not somebody who's sitting on a stage with royals talking about the importance of challenging stigma. I guess most people's prototypical image of somebody who's been locked up in a psych ward is, homeless and dependent on state handouts, etc., etc. But that's not true in your case. Do you think you're just unique, or have you met other people that have succeeded?
I'm probably unique for certain things, but definitely not for that. The statistics sadly bear out the reality of how many people are suffering as we speak from a mental illness, and that doesn't matter what background you're from, whether you've got a nice car in the drive or you're homeless, right? It doesn't discriminate, mental illness, and it can affect anybody. And that's what has also been just like the wow moments where I get a message or a friend said, "Oh, can we go for a drink in a couple of days?" And then they share with me going, "Oh, well, actually, I'm on antidepressants. I ended up being in hospital." And you're like, "But you're managing like 1,000 people in a really massive organization." Like,
yeah.
So I think it's just the portrayal, isn't it? It's the head in hands. It's it's the way mental illness has been kind of marketed, by media and everybody of certain type of person, and that's when the reason, one of the motivations that keeps me talking. I always think I'm not a great speaker, but until somebody better comes along or more people doing it, I'll keep on doing when I'm asked to do stuff. But
you're fishing for a compliment, ain't gonna happen.
the reason when I finished that first talk, this person came up to me and she said, "It's so nice to hear a guy speaking."
Yeah,
and I was like going, "What?" I could have literally said anything, right? I could have probably said 2 words, and she probably would have still said, "Wow, it's so nice to hear a guy speaking." And maybe also, because of my background, because of what I look like and I've got 2 kids and all these other bits and pieces that you wouldn't historically think of somebody that had been really seriously ill in hospital.
You don't get sectioned because you're a little bit down.
No,
it's not the way. I know this, and people don't understand it, but it's very, very serious stuff. And people's right to protect it who are sectioned and all that sort of stuff. But it's not very common. It's an interesting story that you have. And I wonder how many people who are in recovery from these experiences aren't talking about them. Again, maybe because of stigma, because they're worried about how people will think about them.
Yeah, I think so. And also just, there was, especially those first few years trying to get back on my feet, I didn't want to talk about it. Yeah. Right. I didn't feel strong enough to talk about it. And I think that's sometimes a problem with some campaigns that have happened recently, which, whether there's high profile ones on ITV or whatever that's talking about it's good to talk and everything. And it really is good to talk, but also don't feel under pressure to talk. I've definitely met people that have been talking about their mental health and their mental illness, and they're still quite ill, and they're probably not got the support and stuff.
And I've seen it. In fact, I saw it at a conference I'm not going to name because I think you went to it as well. But there was definitely one of the speakers there, which I ended up having to support quite a lot because they were very vulnerable and there wasn't appropriate support in place. And yeah, I mean, I think that is an issue that the field needs to look at. But on the whole, my feeling is, I don't know about but my feeling is, having brought in more people with lived experience to discuss what's going on has improved the presentation. And that issue you said about marketing, the marketing of mental illness, people who've been ill, has been absolutely appalling. I suppose because, it's an attempt to get resources or something like that. I don't know what it is, but it's very much deficit-based, as I would say. Not at all asset-based. The assumption is you have a mental illness, that's the whole of you, you're stuffed. No, I mean, it's an aspect of who we are as human beings. And even with severe and serious mental illnesses such as yours, it's an aspect of who you are. It's not the totality of you. So I wanted to sort of lay the sort of groundwork a little bit, and people get this idea and understand that you are pretty hot shit when it comes. You are, Jon. Forget it. You are. Anybody who sort of gets into recovery is extraordinary because it's horrifying. It's terrifying going through those types of experiences and rebuilding your life in whatever way. You don't have to become, on the stage with the royals in the way that you did, Jon, but just getting back to life is an amazingly courageous thing to do when you've been frightened by your own mind.
Yeah, but I think what it does, and other people that I've met that have gone through similar to me, have gone through that recovery stage, I think also it does give you that ability to listen to your body more. You've learnt, right, those telltale signs of when something may not be right, where you're not sleeping properly, where you may be overthinking certain things. You know, that's the benefit, right, of going through something so horrible, is that you can start to actually look after yourself better. What can improve and impact on your well-being. And bizarrely, I think, you have to ask the people that's worked for me over the years whether I'm just completely lying and making this up. But I think that managing people after having a mental illness has made me a better manager of people, because I want to get the best. I want to get the best out of you. But I don't want it to be to the, negative on your home life or on your, on your personal, your own health. And so I hope over the years that I've been able to try and push people, but also knowing, like, when I'm be really quick to say, right, take the day off, take 2 days off, take as long as you need. Your health is more important than this video that we're filming or this website that's got to go live. It's just, your health is number one. And I think it's knowing that balance of when to push, but also knowing when to take the foot off. Yeah.
So here's the story. You come from like a quite traumatic, tragic background, which is disturbing in terms of your father, your experience in hospital, and you put your life back together and you discover sort of running and this passion and being part of a community that does that. And then, we met a few years ago, and you're successful in all of these areas. You're a great advocate and good at sharing lived experience and being humble about it, all those things. And then, like a year after you and I met, this extraordinary thing happened called the pandemic. And what happened? I mean, I sort of can only imagine it was quite a challenge.
Yeah, it was. So I'd been really, I guess on one hand, I've been really lucky that up until the Christmas of 2020, was it? Had been really busy. I'd got my fair share of travel in. and I've been doing a lot of work for FIFA, and so it was brilliant. And I was probably doing a bit too much work, and I actually decided to take January off to spend a bit of time with my kids, fix the broken toilet seats, do a little bit of work around the house, because obviously January is a quietish month anyway, and work will pick up. Footballs will still get being kicked later in the year, and I'll just pick up the work a few months later. And as we know, we all had plenty of time to fix and do DIY for like 2 years. And I think for me, I was probably a bit early. Everybody's experience of the pandemic has been different and at different stages. For me, with 2 young kids, one of my son has had breathing difficulties and stuff when he was younger. And obviously the news was building in its intensity before we got to lockdown. And I started to catastrophize. I started to really worry about the health of friends and family. I was worried about money, and that, well, can't you see what's going to happen? Like and so what savings I had, I thought was going to just evaporate as markets collapse and everything. So I really got into quite a negative space of, second guessing what I thought was going to happen. And I did talk about it. I did but it was difficult because everybody else was trying to deal with it in their own way. My wife has got a very important job, and she was very busy trying to sort out her team and office and everything. And so it was, for me, I don't know, like how you found it, but for me, those, even before lockdown, I found it pretty tough going.
The first lockdown for me was okay because I tend to be socially anxious. And so actually avoiding contact with people, being told I had to do that, was sort of okay. And I seem to remember it was a nice summer.
It was lovely, yeah.
But when it came to the Christmas, that's when I began to fall apart, and I spoke to my GP and got some meds and stuff like that, because it was just, I sort of knew that I was going to struggle at that point, and sort of because at that point it was wearing me down. So that's when, I really cut back on everything, and I got some meds prophylactically just to sort of help smooth things out, and I did a lot of resting at home. I did a lot of putting on weight. That was okay, and sort of really cutting down on things and taking care of myself because I have these vulnerabilities. So, but like you, I'm lucky I've learned that I have the vulnerabilities, and I'm lucky I've learned what helps me.
Yeah, and like going, when we were allowed to go for a little run and stuff, that really, really helped. But also going to bed really helped, right? Because I know it will pass, right? I know that, like, as you say, like if you've been through it, it doesn't, you know it will pass in the end. You've got to kind of ride it out.
I'm interested, if you don't mind, just discussing a little bit about, because I think it is for guys in particular that you touched upon a couple of things that I think for men trip them over the edge. One is not being able to be the provider, and whether we are the main provider or not is not the issue. It's still part of our sort of makeup to believe that we should be bringing in the bread, and then also the dad stuff, having kids and not being available for them. And I imagine both of those were quite triggering subjects for you and quite emotionally challenging subjects for you to think about. How did you sort of resolve that stuff? What did you do to sort of help yourself and get yourself through that, do you think?
I think, the good things that I was able to, try, I ended up, because my wife she was really busy with work, and my work had just kind of disappeared, so that kind of providing bit was kind of, at least, I guess the government was, relatively quick to start offering kind of furlough and bits and pieces. But that was, I was like further, I was like, well, that's not, in the bigger scheme, it was good that was provided, but that didn't reduce my anxiety.
Yeah.
I think what was good though was obviously I had these two little people or young people to look after and to care for and try and make sure they were happy and having, as good a time as possible, where, they feel like they're, and you said the weather was great, it really was. So we were very lucky that we've got a small garden and, we could try and, it's been wonderful kind of spending so much more time with my kids, right? And
it's really fascinating. A lot of men I talked to have said that there was something happened during, even though it's a struggle, something happened during that time in terms of connection with your family, and something significantly changed. My boy lived in France. He does, and not lived. He still lives there. So it was slightly more challenging to sort of get over to see him. But it was that sense of meaning and purpose, the connection to him, and wanting to sort of maintain the love relationships really struck me. So you have this period of turmoil, period of loss. Again, because of the skills you have, you come through it. And I think it's important that people understand this, that recovery from mental illness doesn't mean that, you just sort of reach this lovely plateau and everything's happy and you've got nice little flowers and all that. It comes and goes, it ebbs and flows, and life circumstances can knock you back. But hopefully, like you, you've got the skills and resources in place to manage more effectively.
Yeah, and I think it's again with better education, with things like your show. Guys that actually want to know, right? But they just don't know. They're just out of the loop a lot of the time of where to get help or what's available or what they should be doing. Yeah. Again, slightly down to role models and to change those behaviours, right? So
you stabilise, I guess, at some point, and then you start developing new projects, which I think it might be nice to discuss now. So the sort of you come through this again, Phoenix-like, you rise, and then you begin to sort of develop some projects, and there's a huge list of them, which is Speakers Collective, What's Going On in Your Head, Jon and Jon Run New York, Let's Talk About Loss, Brave to the Moon, SK. I mean, seriously? Tell me about some of those things that you've been doing over the last couple of years, which have been, I guess, directly linked to your recovery, but also helping other people in many ways.
So, I guess I like having lots of things on. I like being busy.
You clearly do, Jon.
But whether I like it or it's just like this the way I am, I guess I kind of, I sometimes wonder it would be a bit more simple just doing one thing. But anyway, and again, I think it's the last 5 years just being more open. And right. It's funny when you're open about yourself and when you're open about maybe what's kind of important to you, your life does change a little because you start to interact with other people who are like-minded as yourself, or they may say, "Oh, Jon, talk to this person," and there was some wonderful coincidences or serendipity, or however you want to put it, or was it something to do with the cosmos? But there was some real planets aligning on a few different things, and I think as that fear had slightly ebbed away, had kind of disappeared, that just thought, let's give it a go, let's try, and also. To go from the heads together point of view, that collaboration is so. If you've got an idea, however silly you think it is, if you can find one other person that thinks actually that's got legs, or why don't you try and do that? It doesn't need 100 people to try and get you to try and do something. And I think that's what's been lovely about the different projects that I've been involved in. Have generally come from either myself or somebody else that said, "Oh, could we do this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course we can," right? And so some of the projects you mentioned there. So there was Rave to the Moon. So there's an amazing beatboxer called SK Shlomo, and done some work with him during lockdown. He did this show every, I think it was every Thursday, a live YouTube show, getting kids to beatbox, and we made a song at the end of the 7-week show run that was brilliant. So definitely Google that kind of SK Shlomo and beatboxing. And off the back of that,
James will put a link out there. So
off the back of doing those kind of kids online YouTube shows that Shlo came up with, we were obviously still in lockdown when it came to New Year, and this idea of like, oh my goodness, there's going to be a new year where we're all going to be stuck at home, and had this idea of, could we, get everybody dancing in their living rooms, raising money for charity. And Rave to the Moon sounded quite catchy, and a domain name was bought, a website was built, and some amazing artists were booked that performed all from home. And we partnered with an app called Sweatcoin, and thousands of people downloaded this app, and it's, as you move, the step counter, we were able to kind of bring all the steps together from everybody taking part. And we had a visual representation of a spaceship trying to get to the moon, and in real time we could see people donating to their charity, their chosen charity, and also the steps. We could see the thousands of steps. We went past the International Space Station. We didn't sadly make it to the moon this time. But
actually, we need some help at the moment. You might need to do it. Apparently.
Okay.
So they need some help to get back to Earth.
Okay. Well, we're floating around somewhere kind of up near the stars at the moment. But that was, again, just an idea, right? And I think that was what was great about lockdown, because people were stuck at home. Creative people that wanted to try and do something to create connection. Gave that opportunity. And so
what's interesting for me about this, James, just to say, James is a techie guy, I forwarded you the email with all the links that Jon sent to me, so we can put those links out there and people can see them. But what's interesting me and what intrigues me about this is this notion of transformation, that you go through these horrible experiences and it is possible to transform them into these creative, fun, wonderful experiences. I don't think you need to go through horrible experiences to be creative. That's not what I'm saying. But it's the shift from that deficit to that asset-based model. So we can stay in the deficit and say, oh, woe is me, this is a problem. Or we can shift the frame, can't we? And it seems to me that that's what you're about, Jon. That's what you try to do each time, within the vulnerabilities, within the limits of your humanness, and that you can be broken. But it seems to me that that's sort of your energetic impulse, is to look for, well, with the collaborations, etc. But how do I transform this? How do I create something from this? Is that a reasonable thing to say about you?
I think so, and I think I've worked in sectors where it's incredibly competitive and where there really is no new ideas and you're just trying to slightly do it better. The mental health space, because it has been so underfunded, it has been so stigmatized. Actually, what is a breath of fresh air is that you can do something, however big or small. It could be a bake sale, or it could be trying to rave to get to the moon, right? It can, whatever it is, it will make a difference, and also you will be supported. And I think that's what is quite exciting for me, is that something that's a bit of a silly idea, or that could this work? It has an audience, that because you can kind of tap into a group of people that aren't currently being reached, and whether that's by music, by doing a music event, by doing setting up safe spaces for people to talk about loss and bereavement, that Let's Talk About Loss do. There's lots of things that can be done in this space, where if you're motivated to try to do something, you will make a difference. And that's what I love. I love the fact that it is once you kind of tap into this space, it is very collaborative a lot of the time, and people try to help.
I agree, and I think it's also, there's a lot of kindness in the space, and there's a lot of compassion particularly from people that bring in lived experiences. There is that sense in which, well, I've been there and done it, and I get it, and I I'm going to help you because I know it helps me, and that sense of competition just drops off, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned lived experience, and I really think kind of, lived experience is a brilliant way to bring about change.
Yeah.
Because it does bring, you've obviously got the professionals, but really, if you've got somebody who's got that lived experience, who will bring the reality of that illness or that experience to life. And one of the things that I found by sharing my lived experience, just like you're saying nice things to me, we'll finish this call, and there will, especially if you're early on in sharing your story, if you've been on the news or you've in the local newspaper, there will be a time where you were like, was that a good idea? What are people thinking of me? And I think it's so important that we create a space that's supporting people who share their lived experience. And that was, one of the motivations for being part of the Speakers Collective and a director, along with Joe Emerson, is to create this community of people that share their lived experience, not just on mental health, on a variety of subjects, but they've got that support network there of other understanding people that know what it's like to share your lived experience.
And there's sometimes I think it's presented that there's the professional way and there's the lived experience way, and they're not separate like that. Because I remember, I'm so old at this stuff. It's like ridiculous so long I've been around doing it. But I remember 25 years ago now, sitting in a trust meeting, a mental health trust meeting, where they were discussing the evidence that demonstrates that if people, senior managers within that trust, were to share their experience of psychological distress, there would be a significant reduction in time off sick for staff, because those staff would be encouraged to go and seek help earlier. And so we've known about this. The evidence is unassailable that encouraging people to share their experience of distress, and in particular distress, and then overcoming it, because that's the vast majority of people, that's the experience. They have the psychological distress, they learn the tools and resources, they get into recovery, and then they learn to manage that distress better, and they get on with their lives and they rebuild their lives. So your story is very familiar to me, but it's not one that gets out in the press. They seem to want the story of the person who had a dreadful time and ended up not, somewhere in some cul-de-sac somewhere. But that's not the truth of mental illness. Mental illness affects so many people. I mean, you would, in many ways, looking at the stats, you would say mental illness is the norm. And it is. And yet somehow we still seem to be going as a society. So that tells us something, doesn't it?
Yeah, it tells us we just need to create a more compassionate, understanding world, right? And before we finish,
I want to talk about your New York stuff. Your sort of
so
what's going on there?
So obviously we've had a pandemic and we haven't been able to travel anywhere, and at the beginning of the year, I know some people don't like New Year's resolutions and stuff and all that, but I always look at it as like a clean slate to have another go. And the beginning of the year, I kind of came up with a couple of different ideas, and one of the ideas was to run it'll be 5 years. It is 5 years since Jon and I ran the London Marathon. Wow. Jon now lives in America, so I was like, oh, what do we do to
Jon, who's the death
Jon, whose sister died. So Jon, who I ran the 2017 London Marathon, so I kind of sent him a message. Actually, I created a WhatsApp group with the two of us in it called New York Run 2022. And we didn't have a place or anything. I bought a domain name, jonandjon.run, with both different spellings of Jon, because he spells it the wrong way with an H. And
what a strange guy.
exactly. And so that's the plan. We've now got a place, 2 places, luckily, running for the Samaritans in New York.
Brilliant.
And so, yeah, check out johnandjohn.run as we try and figure out. I'm definitely not match fit at the moment. So, but it's going to be really interesting. I want to also do research into running and the importance that running can have on people's well-being. And so, as well as raising money, I also want to actually do some research off the back of it as well.
Great. So people can donate and support you and the charity and that you are supporting as well. James will have put the link out there, but just tell us the domain name again.
Yep. So it's johnandjohn.run. So it's either JOHN and JON.run or the other way around.
Right. There you go. And John, it's just I love talking to you. It's sort of amazing. It's like you're like this sort of onion that unpeels. It's like, and then I have that thing, and then I've got this family, and then I've got this business, then I've got this, and then I've got that, and then that's how it is. And I love the sort of way you engage with your life and the way that you engage with your recovery. And one of the things that strikes me is that you're so damned normal. It's great. It's really approachable. Okay. It's like this is the way it is.
Mm. It didn't always used to be this way, and I think that's the thing. It's but it, partly maybe it's a bit that comes from age and realizing what's the worst that happened. That person won't talk to me again. But I think I think it's and these things take time. It's easy in an hour to rattle off all your successes, but I think also again it takes time to do it, and that's fine, right? And so don't be put off.
The point is this, that yes, it does take time. It takes hard work, and it takes learning and growth and development. It takes humility. It takes accepting that you're vulnerable. But it is possible to reach a point. And if somebody's struggling at the moment, it is more than possible to reach a point at some point in your life where you're sitting rattling off your successes rather than ruminating about your fears.
Yeah, and just as a final point, I guess, I mentioned the Samaritans, and, if anybody is listening to this, if they are struggling and it's difficult to turn to a friend or somebody to support, Samaritans there 24/7. You can phone them up on 116 123, and they're just an amazing resource there of thousands of volunteers that are ready to listen.
That's a good way to end. Pick up that phone, folks. It's really cool. John, you say that. I'm going to have to say goodbye. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I just love bringing back guests from some years ago and catching up. And let's
hope it's not 2 years. Hopefully. I'll see you out running on that marathon. That was the other bit that I was hoping. See you on the start line.
That is now called the Snickers bar. That's the marathon I run on. All right, you stay there, John. Goodbye to everybody. See you all next week, and have a great week in between. Goodbye.